Hello, everyone. This is Outnumbered. I'm Emily Campagno, here with my co-host, Harris Faulkner, and also joining us today, Molly Hemingway, Lily Gil-Valletta, and Mark Thiessen. Now, we begin with the growing political and potential legal liability the president's handling of classified documents could have on his future plans, as the growing scandal raises even more unanswered questions. There have been 6 or 7 discoveries in different locations, but we still don't know who removed those documents in the first place, what exactly was in them, where they were kept before they ended up in Delaware and the Penn Biden Center, when and why they were taken, and how did the president remove these documents exactly? Our own Peter Doocy tried to get some answers at the White House press briefing. Watch.
Is President Biden involved in a cover-up?
The president has been very clear that he takes this very seriously. You asked me kind of a question that everybody laughed at, which was an interesting question to ask, but any other underlying questions that you may have, I would refer you to my colleagues, the White House counsel. I'm going to continue to be prudent. I'm going to continue to be consistent and refer you to any questions you have there.
Now, even some Democrats are raising questions about the White House's transparency on the issue, or lack thereof. And they fear this could turn into a major problem for the party come 2024. The White House downplaying those concerns when pressed on the potential impact yesterday. Watch.
President Biden is still intending to run for re-election in 2024, right?
I'll just repeat what the president said after the midterm election, which is he intends to run.
Is there a precedent for people running for president after FBI agents search their sock drawer?
He's going to focus on continuing to deliver for the American people. That's his focus. That's what he focuses on every day. That's what he's been focusing on the last 2 years. And nothing is going to change that.
Oh, Molly, as the scandal keeps growing, as the questions keep growing, it seems that we learn less and less about the real answers that Americans need to know.
Right. The Biden administration keeps talking about how transparent they are, but they're actually not being transparent at all. We still don't understand why people were even looking for documents in the first place. Was that related to the U.S. attorney who's investigating the Biden family business out of Delaware? We don't know what these documents are exactly. And, you know, it's never good to be handling classified documents this way. But I think what we really understand is that this is probably related to that Biden family business where you trade on the Biden family name, you're getting money from foreign oligarchs or the Chinese Communist Party for access to Joe Biden. And that's why it's a national security problem more than just a paperwork dispute.
And Harris, you know, Molly hits the nail on the head, the normal family business. Is it somehow that we've grown accustomed, and by we, I mean the Washington swamp, has grown accustomed to that being the Biden family business, so now they're just, it's just another day that ends in Y?
Well, look, I mean, the Biden family business, we don't really know what it is yet, because a lot of the Biden family papers were all over the place, and none of them belong to the Biden family. We don't really know, as Molly has just said, what's truly in those papers. The University of Delaware has 1,850 boxes of documents. Are any of those classified? Why haven't the DOJ and the FBI mobilized on them? And oh, I forgot, Mark, you have to be invited now if you're the FBI by the president to the United States, like it's, you know, some kind of a scone and tea party. But it's not. It's, in fact, you won't get to eat anything but crow depending on what they find. So I really want to know now who's moving next on Delaware, and how come everything's in Delaware? I know he was, well, we do know. Yeah. I mean, you got books being written. I mean, there are reasons why a former vice president and senator might have wanted to take papers. The problem is they didn't belong to him. And certainly as senator, they didn't belong to him. He signed a document, a senator, that said I wouldn't take him out of a skiff, or at least that's what senators do. Maybe I shouldn't assume he signed it.
That's such a great tee up. This is why I love you so much as a co-host, because I feel like we are in each other's brains so much. I love it. So, Mark, let's sort of set that scene for a second that Harris talked about, right? So this university says, all right, yes, we have 1,850 boxes of documents from Biden's time as a senator over 15 years ago. And they say we will not release it until 2 years after he has officially resigned from public service. Now, remember, during allegations of sexual harassment during his candidacy for president, there was a clamor to release those documents. Many people said there might be something of import and relevance in those documents. Now the GOP wants them. The White House has released a statement that says only for legitimate concerns will we release anything or cooperate, let alone mentioning the university's position. But the point remains, Mark, that there is no power like a subpoena power.
No, that's very true. And also the FBI doesn't need the University of Delaware's permission if they want to go in and look at those boxes. So
That's right.
here's the thing. The president's defenders have been going at pains to explain all the differences between his case and Trump's case. And I've got a difference for you. Joe Biden has been doing this for 15 years or more, right? Which is very different than Donald Trump. So, you know, when these documents were first found at the Penn Biden Center in his home, they tried to blame the staff. They tried to blame Kathy Chung, who was his executive assistant, and throw her under the bus and say, well, maybe she's the one who did this and all the rest of it. But now we found documents from his Senate tenure. Kathy Chung didn't work for him in the Senate. He had a completely different staff in the Senate. So what this shows is this isn't a staff problem. This is a Joe Biden problem. He has been doing this for decades. I mean, he came to the Senate in 1972. You look through these 1,800 boxes going back to 1972, he might have some classified documents from the Cold War in his
Heaven help us. And that's right, Kathy Chung was
I know you're kind of not kidding.
I'm not kidding.
I'm not going to do that math, but it might work. And Kathy Chung was installed, remember, at the behest of Hunter.
Exactly.
Right? So it shows, what tangled webs we weave. And it seems the Americans, however, Lily, might not find these answers unless these investigations play out with the good use of our tax dollars.
That's right. And talking about the tax dollars, the taxpayer, and the people we are responsible to, who are the American people. This is disrespectful when there is no transparency. There's so many gaps in the story. Is it a raid? Is it a search? Is it an invitation? And which one is it? And does it vary based on who the character, the personality, or the last name is?
Yes.
It shouldn't. It should not. Because the rules apply to us all equally, and we deserve better as Americans. I want to know on both sides of the aisle, what's the story, what's missing, what's in 150 boxes, right? And at the same time, not taking action with transparency at this moment, it's going to continue to erode what we already know is an issue, which is people's trust of institutions, of the democracy that makes this country the great country that it's supposed to be. So I think it's disrespectful without knowing the full contents of it all. And I want to know all the way back to as far as we can go, because we need to weave this story and fill the gaps.
Well, I agree with you that Americans deserve better. I don't know if I agree that I agree everyone should be treated equally, but it seems last names have an impact.
They do.
Molly, here's what I want to ask you about, because I think we're hearing two different things out of Washington. So what are your thoughts on, there's a faction that argues they're standing by Biden, he's going to be their man in 2024. And then there are some who argue, no, this is them laying him out to dry, and they can chalk up him not running in 2024 to, well, it was all about the classified documents. What say you? What is your prediction?
Well, definitely in D.C., the general consensus does seem to be that they're going after Biden to try to remove him. I don't actually feel like that's showing by what we're seeing, how the Department of Justice is handling things. They have bent over backwards to be kind to him. They were allowing that story to be kept secret for months. There's a complete deviation between how they treated Trump, which was very immature. It was very unprofessional, raiding the former president's house over this document dispute, versus like how gentle and careful they are. I basically think that it's kind of cute how we act like problems for Democrats are electoral problems. They're only electoral problems if the Democratic machine decides for them to be electoral problems.
I love that. And Mark, what do you make of the argument the New York Times made yesterday, where the refusal for the White House to be transparent was at the behest of attorneys? That the friction between transparency and cooperation is that of attorneys versus a PR campaign, versus the fact that Americans pay that salary and Americans deserve the transparency of our executive branch.
Well, it's belied by Joe Biden's own words. He said, I have no regrets and there's no there. Well, actually, there is there. It's there and there and there. There's classified documents in all these places. And so to say, what the president should be saying is, look, classified documents, anytime classified documents are not in a secure place, a mistake has been made, something's gone wrong, I'm going to get to the bottom of what's happening. Instead, he says, no regrets. I did nothing wrong. Yeah. Everybody knows he did something wrong, including Democrats, and he's going to regret those words.
And Emily, I have a point. Even before these documents came about in the story we're talking about here, there was already 70% of Democrats that didn't want President Biden to run again. So here we go. It's just confirmation for that.
Yeah, I wonder how many of them had access to classified documents. I'm being facetious. All right, so you ask a great question, Lily. And it is both sides of the aisle that now we have to start to ask what happens at the end of serving, that you can take classified documents, or maybe during the time you served. So we are just now learning for the first time that former Vice President Mike Pence has discovered classified documents at his home in Indiana. Vice President Pence informed Congress on Tuesday of this week, which would be yesterday, that, or last week, excuse me, that he discovered documents bearing classified markings in his Carmel, Indiana home on January 16th from his time as vice president. Following the revelations that classified documents from President Biden's tenure as vice president were found at the Penn Biden Center think tank and at his home in Wilmington, Delaware, the vice president's team conducted searches of Pence's Indiana home and political advocacy group, Advancing American Freedom Office.
Wow.
So, Mark, I'm going to come to you first on this as I'm going through. 2 letters Pence team sent to the National Archives happened on January 18th and January 22nd. FoxNews.com digital has obtained this document. Let me click on it here. Dear Ms. McClure, as Vice President Pence's designated representative to the National Archives, I write to request your assistance with collecting and transferring to the custody of the National Archives an additional set of vice presidential records. The additional records appear to be a small number of documents bearing classified markings that were inadvertently boxed and transported to the personal home of the former VP at the end of the last administration. Pence was unaware of the existence of sensitive classified documents at his personal residence. Vice President Pence understands the high importance of protecting sensitive and classified information and stands ready and willing to cooperate fully with the National Archives and any appropriate inquiry. Mark.
I'm sure what happened is when he heard the news about the Vice President Biden having some
That's
documents inadvertently, that he immediately ordered his staff to go and make sure that there was nothing, and they came across something. We don't know what it was. We don't know. For example, Biden had TSSCI documents, which is that's a
Top
different
secret.
level of seriousness. So, and those are things you can't easily transfer. Secret, confidential documents are a different story. So we don't know what that is. But I think it's great that he was so responsible to check that. And it seems like we've got a broader problem.
Yes.
I think
in our government is a bipartisan
we've
problem
known
of
that,
people
though.
mishandling classified information.
We've known that. And when former President Obama, Molly, changed what it meant, can you talk about that? Because there was a change that Obama made about who can declassify and document so on and so forth. That was during the Hillary Clinton.
Well, and also right before he left office, he changed some of the rules about classification as well. We have multiple issues here. One is that there's so many classified documents going around that there are, I bet Mike Pence will not even be the last person who is a vice president or president to make this kind of announcement. And we do need transparency, and we can't have self-government without transparency. But really, this entire thing, this type of dispute is common. Even what Biden is going through is somewhat common. President Obama had paperwork disputes with the National Archives that are ongoing. What really made this whole thing different is when the National Archives and the Department of Justice took a fairly common paperwork dispute with a former president, one they despise, and they turned it into this big, crazy thing of raiding the home. And now all of a sudden they're being hoisted by their own petard here, where they now have to deal with the fact that there are problems with every former president and vice president.
Real quickly,
that they're handling differently.
Emily, I'm going to come to you with this, because now we're all being able to read this document via Fox News Digital, and we thank them for their great reporting as always. Following press reports of classified documents at the personal home of President Biden, out of an abundance of caution, which is what you said, Mark Thiessen, on Monday, January 16th, Vice President Pence engaged outside counsel with experience in handling classified documents to review records stored in his personal home. Emily, the wording of this is so specific and so spectacularly different than what we heard from Biden. So I do want to know, did any of them have clearances? But what we don't know from Biden, at least we haven't known, is what past did his attorneys have with handling classified documents? From Pence, we get that. From Biden, I don't know that we have.
And it's my understanding the DOJ explicitly approved the handling by his attorneys to do so. I note another remarkable distinction between both, which is that on January 19th, the DOJ requested direct possession of the documents from the ones found in Vice President Pence's home. So that's 1 day later, the DOJ says, give it all back.
And
how many days did they say? Exactly.
Months.
Yeah.
Weeks and weeks and weeks they were allowed to stay in that messy pile in the garage, in the study in Delaware. It's a remarkable distinction. 2 minutes into this breaking news, I wonder what else we're going to learn, that departure in the distinction.
And the difference between Mike Pence's statement and Joe Biden's statement, I have no regrets, there's no there's no big deal.
Yeah.
You know, that he took it seriously. He went and engaged a counsel to do this, cooperated with the Justice Department, did this. Joe Biden says, nothing wrong with what I did.
So talk to me about the politics at play there, though. You know, you have a man who's about to give his State of the Union. I don't know how this doesn't come up. But anyway, maybe he'll try to do it. Maybe he'll bring up Vice President Pence, and then everybody can read for themselves at how differently they were handled. But then you've got the announcement of what he wants to do in 2024, and now it's already coming from the lectern at the White House press briefing. Well, he's always said he intends to run. Was that supposed to be the declaration right there so the president can skip it?
I think that, so here's the thing, that he after the election, when they didn't have an electoral disaster, and he actually turned in, unfortunately, the best performance of a president in the first midterm election since JFK, except for George W. Bush after 9/11. Everyone was expecting there to be a disaster, and so they were all getting ready to push him out. And then he did so much better that all of that got ground to a halt. And now, with this going on, those gears might start moving again a little bit. If this becomes a big scandal and the people who wanted to push him out and get a real liberal in there who's not even going to pretend to be a moderate, that might start coming up again now.
All right. Well, the breaking news this hour with Vice President Pence finding through his attorneys, outside counsel, those who were, in his words and in his statement, experienced handling classified documents, have found in his Indiana home some documents as well. And so they will go forward, have turned those over to the National Archives, and we'll continue to cover the news as it breaks. Wherever it breaks, whichever next place that they choose or don't choose to search for the current President Biden, which has found classified documents in several locations. Okay.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Compagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.